There is something happening right now that is bigger than the device you are holding, bigger than the room you are sitting in, and bigger than any explanation your mind can immediately offer. You did not find this message. This message found you. And before you dismiss that as a nice thing people say, I want you to sit with it for just a moment. Because the difference between those two things is the difference between coincidence and calling. You were led here. Something in the invisible realm pressed pause on every other distraction in your life long enough to make sure these words reached your ears at this exact hour. That is not an accident. That is architecture. That is the hand of a God who does not waste moments, who does not misdial, and who does not send messages to people who were not meant to receive them. You are a chosen one. Not in the way the world uses that phrase as a compliment or a casual affirmation, but in the most literal, most sacred, most terrifying and beautiful sense of those words. You were selected before your name was ever spoken on this earth. You were marked before your mother held you. You were assigned a purpose so specific and so significant that the enemy has spent years trying to convince you that you are ordinary, that you are behind, that you are too broken, too late, or too small for anything truly extraordinary to flow through your hands. But here you are, still standing, still breathing, still reaching for something you cannot fully name, but cannot stop pursuing. That reaching is not desperation. That reaching is destiny recognizing itself. There are signs that mark the chosen ones, and I want to name them plainly because too many of you have been carrying these signs as burdens when they were always meant to be badges. The first sign is that you have always felt like you do not fully belong anywhere you go. Not in your family, not in your friend groups, not in the places where everyone else seems comfortable and settled. You have smiled at the right times and said the right things, but there has always been a part of you standing, slightly to the side, watching, feeling a depth that the conversation around you never quite reaches. That is not a flaw, that is a filter. God built a distance between you and the ordinary world because your assignment is not ordinary. The second sign is that your sensitivity runs deeper than most people can understand. Things that others brush off stay with you. The pain of strangers moves you. You feel atmospheric shifts in a room before anyone speaks. You wake up from dreams that carry weight you cannot always explain, but cannot easily forget. Some people have called this being too emotional, too intense, too much. But that sensitivity is actually spiritual perception, and spiritual perception is the primary tool of those who are called to carry light into dark places. The third sign is that you have survived things that should have broken you. Not just survived, but come out of those seasons carrying something new, something that was not there before the storm. You have looked back at moments that felt like destruction and slowly, sometimes painfully slowly, you began to see that they were actually construction. God was building something in you that comfort never could have produced. The pressure that tried to crush you was actually pressing something out of you, refining something inside of you, the way fire does not destroy gold but reveals it. The fourth sign is that you carry a restlessness that no achievement fully satisfies. You have reached goals, hit milestones, accomplished things that others told you were impossible, and yet something in you keeps saying there is more. Not because you are greedy or ungrateful, but because you were designed for more. Heaven placed an appetite in you that earthly success alone was never meant to fill. That restlessness is a compass. It is pointing you toward the fullness of what you were made to carry. The fifth sign is that this moment right now, the fact that you are here, listening, feeling these words land somewhere deep and undeniable inside your chest, is itself a sign. because chosen ones are drawn toward truth, even when they cannot articulate why, even when they are tired, even when they came into this moment carrying doubt. Something in them always responds to the sound of their own name being called by heaven. And right now, heaven is calling yours. I need you to understand something that changes the way you move. Through the rest of this message and through the rest of your life, the things that have made you feel like an outsider are the very things that qualified you. The wounds that left scars are the very places where your greatest authority now lives. You do not speak comfort to the broken from a distance. You speak it from experience. And that experience was not wasted. It was being stored up, cataloged, transformed into the exact vocabulary someone else needs to hear from your mouth in a season that is coming sooner than you think. You carry a light. Not a dim, flickering, uncertain light, but a light that the darkness has tried to extinguish many times and failed every single time. That light is not a product of your effort or your discipline or your consistency, though all of those things matter. That light is in your nature. It was placed there before you had the language to describe it or the courage to display it. And the reason darkness has worked so hard against you is precisely because it knows what you are. It has always known what you are. The only one in the room who has sometimes doubted it is you. But today, that changes. Today, you begin to align your own understanding of yourself with what heaven has already declared over you. Today, you stop apologizing for the depth you carry and start stepping into the fullness of it. Today, you recognize that every delay, every detour, every door that closed before you could walk through it was not rejection. It was redirection. God was protecting the integrity of your assignment by making sure you arrived at your destination fully formed, not prematurely exposed. Right now, as a prophetic act of agreement with what heaven is speaking over your life, I want you to type the number 777 in the comments. Not because it is a magic number, but because this is the moment you declare out loud that you receive this word, that you accept the reality of your calling, that you refuse to spend another day living beneath the weight of an identity that was never true. 777. Let it be your agreement with the God who chose you before the foundations of this earth were ever laid, who saw every chapter of your story before you lived a single day of it, and who still, knowing everything you have ever done and everything you have ever failed to do, looked at you and said, I choose that one. I want that one. That one is mine. You are not here by accident. You are not reading these words because the algorithm decided to be kind to you. Today, you are here because this is an appointed moment in an appointed season of your life. And the God who holds all things in his hands made sure that these words in your eyes met at exactly this point in time. That is who you are dealing with. That is the kind of God who has been watching over you. And that God, the one who made the stars and knows every one of them by name, knows your name too. He has always known your name. And today he is speaking it again, louder than the noise, steadier than the fear, and closer than you have allowed yourself to believe in a very long time. Welcome, chosen one. This is only the beginning. You are not here by accident. You are not reading these words because the algorithm decided to be kind to you today. You are here because this is an appointed moment in an appointed season of your life, and the God who holds all things in his hands made sure that these words and your eyes met at exactly this point in time. That is who you are dealing with. That is the kind of God who has been watching over you. And that God, the one who made the stars and knows every one of them by name, knows your name too. He has always known your name. And today, he is speaking it again louder than the noise, steadier than the fear, and closer than you have allowed yourself to believe in a very long time. And I want to speak to something that happens the moment a chosen one begins to truly receive that reality, because there is a specific kind of resistance that rises in people who have been through enough to make hope feel dangerous. When words like these land, something in the deeply guarded interior of a person who has been disappointed before will instinctively reach for a reason not to fully receive them. It will say, "This is too good to be true." It will say, "Maybe this is for someone else, and I just happen to be in the room." It will say, "I have felt this before," and then the feeling passed and nothing actually changed. That voice is not wisdom. That voice is the accumulated scar tissue of a heart that has protected itself so many times and for so long that it has begun to mistake the protection for truth. But here is what I know about you. You are still here. After everything that voice has said, after every reason it has offered you to click away or dismiss or deflect, you are still here. And that staying, that persistent, quiet, undefeated reaching towards something your heart has not fully given up on, is one of the most powerful things about you. It is the same quality that kept Hannah returning to the altar year after year. It is the same quality that kept David worshiping in the cave when the throne felt like a fantasy. It is the quality that heaven looks for in the ones it is preparing for the greatest assignments, not the absence of doubt, not the absence of weariness, but the refusal to fully stop. The refusal to let the last word belong to the voice that says you were never really chosen. You were chosen. You are chosen. And the journey we are about to take together through the rest of this message is going to show you not just what that means in the elevated language of spiritual declaration, but what it means in the lived, specific, sometimes painful and sometimes luminous reality of the life you are actually living. Stay with me. The next layer is where everything begins to make a different kind of sense. You have made it this far because something in you refused to stop. And I want you to sit with that for a moment before we go any deeper, because the ones who make it to this point in a message like this are not here casually. They are here because they are hungry. They are here because the ordinary answers stopped satisfying them a long time ago, and they have been searching, quietly, persistently, sometimes desperately, for something that actually reaches the place inside them where the real questions live. That place is not in your mind. It is deeper than your mind. It is in the part of you that was knit together by hands that do not make mistakes, shaped by a wisdom that does not operate on human timelines, and commissioned for a purpose that the world around you has never been fully equipped to recognize. But here is the thing about being chosen that nobody warns you about. It is not comfortable. It is not a life free from pain or confusion or seasons that feel so long and so silent that you begin to wonder if heaven has forgotten your address. Being chosen does not mean being protected from difficulty. It means being equipped to carry difficulty in a way that transforms it. It means being built for a kind of pressure that would shatter someone not made for it. And that pressure, the specific weight of the life you have been living, the accumulation of disappointments and misunderstandings and moments where you gave everything you had and still came up short, all of that has not been evidence that you were forgotten. It has been evidence that you were in training. There is a weight that only chosen ones carry, and it is unlike the weight of ordinary struggle. Ordinary struggle is loud. It announces itself. It draws sympathy. It is visible enough for the people around you to see and respond to. But the weight of the chosen one is often invisible. It sits behind your smile. It hides in the spaces between your words. It shows up at 2 in the morning when the house is quiet and your mind will not stop rehearsing every version of a future you are not yet. Sure, you are allowed to want. It is the weight of knowing you were made for more while still living in the middle of what feels like much less. It is the gap between the call and the fulfillment of the call, and that gap is one of the loneliest places a human being can inhabit. And yet it is in that gap, in that exact space between promise and fulfillment, that the most essential work of formation happens. Not the work you can put on a resume or show to the people who are waiting to see whether you amount to something. The invisible work. The work of character. The work of learning to trust a voice you cannot always hear clearly. Learning to move forward in a direction you cannot always see. Fully learning to hold on to a promise that has not yet materialized in a world that only respects what it can measure and verify and touch. I want to tell you about a woman whose story has been told for thousands of years, and yet whose weight, whose specific invisible weight, is one that I believe you will recognize the moment I begin to describe it. Her name was Hannah, and Hannah carried a burden that was as personal as it was profound. She was a woman who wanted something with her whole being, something that felt like it should have been simple, something that the people around her seemed to receive without effort, and yet for her it remained out of reach year after year after year. The Bible tells us that her rival provoked her severely and made her miserable because the Lord had closed her womb. But Hannah, year after year, went up to the house of the Lord. She did not stop going. She did not stop bringing her ache to the altar. She wept. She poured out her soul. And in one of the most raw and honest moments in all of Scripture, she prayed a prayer so desperate that the priest watching her thought she was drunk because her lips were moving, but no sound was coming out. That is the kind of prayer that chosen ones pray. Not the polished, composed, theologically articulate prayers that sound impressive in a room full of people. The prayers that have no more words. The prayers that are just groaning. The prayers that are just a body bent over an altar and a heart saying to God, "You know what I need because I no longer have the strength to say it out loud." Hannah was not praying from strength. She was praying from the end of herself. And that chosen one is precisely where heaven tends to show up. Not when you have it all together. Not when your faith is pristine and your doubts are fully resolved. But at the end of yourself, at the bottom of what you can produce on your own, at the altar where you have brought the thing you have been carrying the longest and you finally lay it down and say, "I cannot carry this anymore. I need you to carry it for me." The weight you have been carrying is real. I am not going to minimize it or spiritualize it into something that does not account for how hard it has actually been. Some of you have been waiting for something so long that hope itself has started to feel like a liability. Because hope that is disappointed over and over again starts to cost something. It starts to cost your willingness to want. And so some of you have quietly stopped wanting, stopped praying, stopped believing that the promise was really for you. Because the alternative, continuing to hope in the face of continued silence, felt like a kind of madness that you could no longer afford. I understand that. And more importantly, God understands that. God is not looking at your exhausted hope with disappointment. He is looking at it with the same eyes he turned toward Hannah in that temple. The eyes of a God who sees exactly what you have been enduring and exactly what you need and exactly when to move. Because Hannah's story does not end at the altar. It continues. She brought her pain to God. She poured out her soul, and the scripture says the Lord remembered her. 1 Samuel chapter 1 verse 19. The Lord remembered her. Those three words are among the most powerful in all of the Bible. Not because they imply that God had forgotten, but because they declare that God moved, that God, in his perfect timing, turned his full attention and his full power toward the specific situation of one woman who had been faithful enough to keep bringing her ache to the altar, even when the altar seemed to give nothing back and everything changed. Not gradually, not in a way that could be explained away, in a way that was undeniable, in a way that silenced every voice that had ever used her waiting against her, in a way that made the length of the waiting make sense in the light of the magnitude of what arrived. Your waiting has not been a mistake. Your silence has not been abandonment. The very fact that you are still here, still seeking, still bringing whatever is left of your hope to whatever altar you can find, is itself a testimony that you are not done. Chosen ones do not quit at the altar. They may weep there. They may collapse there. They may pour out prayers that have no words, but they keep coming back. They keep showing up. Because something deeper than their discouragement, something implanted in them before they were born, will not allow them to fully walk away from the God who called them. The weight you carry is not a punishment. It is a preparation. Every year Hannah waited, something was being developed in her that could not have been developed any other way. A depth of dependence, a clarity of desire, a faith that had been stripped of all its superficial layers and distilled down to something pure and unshakable. That is what the waiting does in the chosen one. It removes everything that is not essential. It burns away the pretense and the performance and the version of faith that was really just social habit, and it leaves something real, something that can sustain the weight of the very thing you have been asking for. You are in a season of preparation that is closer to its conclusion than you know. The altar where you have been weeping is about to become the place where your prayer is answered. The thing that has felt like the longest chapter of your life is about to give way to something that reframes everything that came before it. Not because you finally earned it, not because you finally got your faith right enough, or prayed hard enough, or stopped doubting long enough, but because God, who sees the whole story from beginning to end, has determined that this is the moment, that the formation is complete enough, that you are ready enough, that the promise is ready to be fulfilled. Keep going, chosen one. Heaven has not moved. It has been here the whole time, watching, waiting with you, holding the answer in hands that are never late. And that holding, that specific quality of divine patience that keeps the answer safe and intact and perfectly preserved through every season of your waiting, is itself a form of love that the world has no adequate language for, because the world measures love by immediacy, by how quickly the response comes, by how little time passes between the asking and the receiving. But heaven measures love by faithfulness, by the quality of what arrives when it arrives, by the completeness of the answer when the fullness of the time has come. And the answer that has been held for you through the length of your waiting has not diminished in the holding. It has not lost any of its power or its precision or its capacity to transform everything it touches. If anything, it has been growing, being refined, being prepared to meet you at exactly the level of depth and readiness that the waiting itself has been building in you. The altar is not the end of your story. It is the turning point of it. And the turn, chosen one, is coming. You are still here. And that matters more than you know. Because the ones who are still here at this point in the message, the ones who have not clicked away, not gotten distracted, not decided that this was not for them, are the ones for whom this next layer was specifically prepared. There is a reason your attention has held. There is a reason something in you keeps leaning in rather than pulling back. That reason is not curiosity alone. That reason is recognition. The deepest part of you, the part that was formed before your first breath, is recognizing the sound of its own frequency being spoken back to it. And that frequency, chosen one, is something heaven placed inside you long before the world had any opportunity to tell you who you were or were not. We talked about the weight that chosen ones carry. We sat with Hannah at the altar, and we let the reality of invisible struggle and faithful endurance speak to the places in you that have been aching in silence. But now I want to take you somewhere deeper, because the weight is only one side of what it means to be chosen. The other side is the frequency. And this is where things begin to shift from what you have been enduring into what you were actually built to carry. Because chosen ones do not just suffer differently from everyone else. They also perceive differently. They receive differently. They are tuned to a channel that the majority of the world cannot access, and that channel carries information, direction, creative insight, spiritual discernment, and a quality of inner knowing that cannot be produced by intelligence alone, or education alone, or experience alone. You have felt this. You have had moments where you knew something before you had any logical reason to know it. Moments where a thought arrived fully formed, where an answer appeared before you had consciously worked through the question, where you felt a warning in your body about a situation before any visible evidence confirmed it. The world calls these things intuition, or gut feeling, or coincidence. But they are none of those things. They are the result of a frequency that God embedded in your spiritual architecture, a way of receiving and processing reality that goes beyond the five senses and taps into something that Scripture calls the mind of Christ, a quality of perception that is not natural in origin, but supernatural in source. Hannah understood this after her encounter at the altar. When the answer came, when the child she had prayed for arrived, she did not simply exhale with relief. She sang, she prophesied, she stood up and declared things about the nature of God and the reversal of human fortunes that went far beyond the personal miracle she had just experienced. Her prayer in 1 Samuel chapter 2 reads like a cosmic declaration, a prophetic document that speaks about kings being brought low and the humble being lifted, about the pillars of the earth belonging to God, about a future that her natural eyes could not yet see, but her spiritual frequency was already receiving. Hannah was not just a woman who received an answer to prayer. She was a woman whose encounter with God unlocked a channel of perception that produced one of the most powerful prophetic utterances in the entire Old Testament. And here is what I want you to understand about that. Hannah did not go looking for a prophetic gift. She went to the altar with her pain. She brought her emptiness. She poured out her grief. And in the act of bringing her most vulnerable, most honest, most broken self before God, something opened in her. The channel that had always been there, the frequency that had always been embedded in her design, was activated by the encounter. Not by her performance, not by her having the right theology or the right spiritual vocabulary, by her willingness to come as she was and let God meet her there. That is the pattern for chosen ones. The frequency does not get activated by perfection. It gets activated by surrender. It gets activated by the moments where you stop trying to manage your own story and you bring it, unedited and unpolished, to the one who authored it. And when that happens, something opens. Something in you that was always there, but had been muted by noise and fear, and the accumulated weight of living in a world that does not know what to do with people like you, begins to come online, begins to receive, begins to transmit. And the people around you start to feel it, even when they cannot name it, even when they have no framework for what they are experiencing in your presence. You carry a light that terrifies darkness, not because you are particularly brave or particularly gifted in any way that your resume would reflect, but because the frequency inside you disrupts the frequency of everything that is not aligned with the purposes of God. Your presence in a room changes the atmosphere of that room. Your prayers carry a weight that extends far beyond what your eyes will ever see. Your words, spoken from that deep place inside you where the real frequency lives, carry the capacity to shift things in the invisible realm that then manifest as change in the visible realm. This is not metaphor. This is the actual mechanics of how chosen ones function in the world. The prophet Isaiah captured this reality when he wrote, "And I want you to receive these words not as ancient poetry, but as a present declaration over your life right now." Isaiah chapter 43, verse 19. "See, I am doing a new thing. Now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I am making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. Do you not perceive it?" That question is aimed directly at you, because perception is the gift that is being offered here. Not just the new thing, not just the way in the wilderness and the streams in the wasteland, but the capacity to perceive it before it is fully visible, to receive it in the frequency before it arrives in the physical, to carry the knowing of what God is doing in a season where the circumstances have not yet caught up to the promise. That is the chosen one's specific assignment in any given season, to perceive, to hold the frequency of what is coming, to be the person in the room who knows, not because they can prove it, not because the evidence is yet visible, but because the channel inside them is open and receiving, and they have learned, sometimes through a great deal of pain and a great deal of surrender, to trust what they are receiving more than what they are seeing. Now I want to tell you something about that frequency that is going to connect what we have been exploring in the spiritual realm to something you may not have expected to encounter in a message like this. Because God is not only the author of spiritual truth, He is the author of all truth. And all truth, wherever it is found, points back to Him. The scientists who study the human brain have been discovering, layer by layer, something that those of us who live from the inside of the chosen one experience have known for a long time, that there is a state of consciousness, a specific frequency of neural activity that produces the kind of perception, creativity, intuition, and insight that cannot be explained by ordinary cognitive function alone. They have a name for this state. They call it the theta-gamma state. And what they have found, through decades of research and measurement and study, is that this state, this specific frequency of brain activity, is the one most consistently associated with moments of breakthrough insight, deep creativity, accelerated learning, heightened intuition, and what researchers describe as the sense of connection to something larger than oneself. In other words, the scientists have been measuring, with their instruments and their data, the very frequency that God placed inside the chosen ones. They have been charting the neural signature of the thing that Hannah accessed at the altar. They have been mapping, in hertz and waveforms, the brain state that produces the kind of perception Isaiah was describing when he asked, "Do you not perceive it?" This is not coincidence. This is God hiding truth in plain sight, scattering it across every domain of human inquiry so that no matter which direction the seeking heart turns, it eventually finds the same source. The spiritual and the scientific are not in opposition. They are two languages describing the same reality. And the reality they are both describing is this: you were built for a frequency that most people never access. You were designed to operate in a state of perception and creativity and insight that the majority of the world only glimpses accidentally in rare moments of flow or inspiration, and then loses again because they have no framework for sustaining it. But you, chosen one, were made to live there. You were made to inhabit that frequency the way a fish inhabits water, not as an occasional visitor, not as someone who stumbles into clarity once in a while and then spends weeks trying to find their way back, as a permanent resident of the state that God designed for you and that science is only beginning to understand. The question is not whether the frequency is real. The question is whether you are going to learn how to access it consistently, how to clear away the noise and the interference and the accumulated static of a world that has been pulling you away from your own signal for far too long. That is what this season is about. That is why you are here. That is why heaven made sure these words reached you today. Because the activation of your frequency is not just about your personal fulfillment. It is about your assignment. It is about the people who are waiting for the version of you that is operating at full capacity, the version of you that is tuned in and turned on and moving from that deep place of perception and knowing and creative power that God placed inside you before the world ever had a chance to tell you to quiet down and fit in. You were never meant to fit in. You were meant to tune in, and the signal has been there the whole time, waiting for you to come home to it. Do not let the shift in what you are about to hear pull you out of the space you are in right now, because what comes next is not a departure from everything we have been building together. It is the next layer of it. It is the part where heaven meets the practical, the part where the spiritual frequency we have been describing finds a doorway into your everyday waking life. Because God has never been interested in giving you truth that stays locked in the mystical and never touches the ground you actually walk on. He is interested in transformation that reaches into your Tuesday mornings and your 3 in the afternoon slumps and your moments of creative paralysis and your sleepless nights when the weight of your calling feels heavier than your ability to carry it. He is interested in the whole life. And so what I am about to share with you is offered in that same spirit, as a tool, as a bridge, as a practical doorway into the frequency that God already placed inside you, and that we have spent the last 3 sections naming and honoring and beginning to awaken. We established something in the last section that I do not want you to lose hold of. Chosen ones carry a specific frequency. Researchers who study the brain call it the theta-gamma state. And what those researchers have found, after decades of measurement and documentation, is that this specific combination of neural frequencies is the one most consistently associated with everything that chosen ones experience at their best. Deep creative insight, accelerated learning, heightened intuition. That sense of connection to something larger than yourself that floods in during your most powerful moments of clarity and knowing. The brain, when it is operating in theta and gamma simultaneously, is not just thinking, it is perceiving. It is perceiving. It is functioning in a mode that goes beyond ordinary cognition into something that the most rigorous scientific language still struggles to fully capture, because what it is describing is the neural signature of the very state that mystics and prophets and chosen ones have been accessing through surrender and prayer and encounter for thousands of years. But here is what the research also shows, and this is the part that I want you to hold carefully. For most adults, this state becomes progressively harder to access as life accumulates. The stress of daily existence, the chronic overstimulation of a world that never stops demanding your attention, the layers of unprocessed disappointment and low-grade anxiety that settle into the nervous system over years of living in a world not designed for people like you. All of these things create interference. They create static on the signal. They do not destroy the frequency, because nothing can destroy what God placed inside you. But they muffle it. They make it harder to tune in, harder to receive, harder to access the state where your most essential self is fully online and fully functional. This is where a man named Dr. James Rivers enters the story. Dr. Rivers is a neuroscientist with over 30 years of dedicated research into the science of human brain performance. His work has been shaped by some of the most rigorous academic environments in the world, including connections to research conducted in partnership with institutions like MIT and NASA, organizations that do not invest in ideas that cannot be substantiated by serious, repeatable, measurable evidence. Dr. Rivers spent the better part of 3 decades asking one specific question. Not, what is the brain capable of in ideal laboratory conditions? But what is the brain capable of in the lives of ordinary people? And what is standing between those ordinary people and consistent access to their own highest potential? What he found, after thousands of hours of research and study, was that the single greatest barrier between most people and the frequency they were designed to operate in was not a lack of intelligence or a lack of discipline or a lack of spiritual awareness. It was interference, neural interference, the accumulated static of a stressed, overstimulated, chronically under-rested nervous system that had simply lost the ability to drop into the theta gamma state with any kind of regularity. And what Dr. Rivers then spent years developing was a way to clear that interference, not through medication, not through years of intensive meditation practice that most people with real lives and real responsibilities simply do not have the time or the structure to sustain, but through a precisely calibrated 7-minute audio experience that uses what neuroscientists call brainwave entrainment to guide the brain gently and efficiently into the exact frequency state where everything we have been talking about today becomes not just possible but accessible. The technology works through a principle that the brain has always operated by. The brain is a frequency-following organ. When it is exposed to specific external sound frequency delivered in specific ways, it naturally begins to synchronize with those frequencies, the way a tuning fork responds to another tuning fork struck nearby. The audio that Dr. Rivers developed uses a combination of binaural beats and isochronic tones, sound frequencies calculated with extraordinary precision to guide the brain through the threshold between ordinary waking consciousness and the theta gamma state. The state where your creativity, your intuition, your capacity for deep learning and insight, and your sense of connection to something larger than yourself are all operating at their highest level. 7 minutes every day. That is the protocol. Not because 7 minutes is a magic number, but because 7 minutes is the precise window that the research identified as the optimal duration for the brain to complete the entrainment process without fatigue or overstimulation. Long enough to cross the threshold, short enough to make it sustainable for someone with a real life and a real schedule and real demands on their time and attention. And I want you to hear from some of the people who have already walked through this doorway, because their stories are not abstract testimonials. They are mirrors. They are people whose circumstances you will recognize because they are not so different from yours. A project manager named Rachel, who had been grinding through the same creative block for 8 months, not sleeping well, not performing at the level she knew she was capable of, not able to access the quality of thinking that had gotten her to where she was in the first place, began using the 7-minute audio daily. Within 3 weeks, she told a colleague that it felt like someone had cleaned a window she had been trying to see through for years. Her output doubled, her clarity returned, her sleep deepened. She described it as feeling, for the first time in a long time, like herself again. a retired teacher named Marcus, 62 years old, who had spent decades feeling that his best thinking was behind him, used the audio for 30 days and reported that he had started writing again, that ideas were arriving the way they had in his 30s, that the mental fog he had accepted as simply a part of aging had lifted in a way he had not believed was possible. Over 19,000 people have now used what Dr. Rivers created, and the results speak with a consistency that goes beyond placebo and beyond coincidence. People are sleeping more deeply. People are thinking more clearly. People are accessing the creative and intuitive capacities that the interference of daily life had been muffling for years. The return rate, the number of people who used it and then said this did not work for me, sits below 4%. That number is not marketing. Language, that number is evidence. Now I know that some of you are sitting with a thought right now that I want to name directly, because it is a valid thought, and you deserve to have it honored rather than dismissed. You are thinking that $39 is not nothing, and you are right, it is not nothing. For some of you, $39 represents a real decision, a real weighing of what you have against what you need, and I do not want to minimize that. What I want to offer you instead is a reframe. The question is not whether $39 is a significant amount. The question is, what is the cost of another year of muffled frequency? Another year of knowing you were made for more and not being able to consistently access the state where that more becomes real. Another year of creative blocks and mental fog and the exhausting gap between who you are when you are fully online and who you are managing to be on an average Tuesday. That cost is not $39. That cost is immeasurable. The Genius Wave is available today for $39, reduced from its standard price of $49, and that offer is available through the link in the pinned comment and the description below this video. Every purchase comes with a 90-day money-back guarantee. Not 30 days, 90 days, 3 full months to use it, experience it, test it against your own life and your own results. And if at the end of that time you do not feel that something has genuinely shifted, you receive every dollar back. No argument, no process, no hoops to jump through. That guarantee exists because Dr. Rivers built something he believes in completely, and he wants you to have the space to discover that for yourself without any financial risk standing in the way. One more thing I need to say plainly. There are imitation products that use similar language and similar claims, circulating in places that have nothing to do with Dr. Rivers or his research. Do not be misled by them. The only legitimate source for the original Genius Wave audio is the single link in the pinned comment and the description below. That is the only place. Any other source is not the real thing, and you deserve the real thing. One more thing I need to say plainly. There are imitation products that use similar language and similar claims circulating in places that have nothing to do with Dr. Rivers or his research. Do not be misled by them. The only legitimate source for the original Genius Wave audio is the single link in the pinned comment and the description below. That is the only place. Any other source is not the real thing, and you deserve the real thing. This offer at this price will not remain open indefinitely. Dr. Rivers has authorized this reduced rate of $39 for this video only, and for a maximum of 250 copies at this price point. Once those 250 are claimed, the price returns to $49 and this link closes. There is no waiting list and there is no second window. If you are watching this within the first 48 hours of it being posted, you are in the window. If you are watching it later, check the link now, because it will tell you immediately whether the discounted access is still available or whether it has already closed. If you have felt something stir in you during this message, if you have recognized your own frequency in what we have been describing, do not let this moment pass without taking the step that could be the most significant practical decision of this entire season of your life. The link is waiting. The frequency is waiting. And so is the version of you that has been trying to get through. There is a thread that runs through everything we have touched in this message. And I do not want you to lose it as we move forward, because it is the thread that holds everything together. It is the thread that connects Hannah at the altar to the frequency inside you, to the science that confirms what heaven already knew. And that thread is this: God has never required you to be fully formed before He moves on your behalf. He has never waited for you to have it all figured out, never waited for your doubts to be fully resolved, never waited for your circumstances to be favorable, or your confidence to be adequate. What He has always responded to, what He has always moved toward, is the heart that keeps showing up. The heart that is tired but still present. The heart that has questions but still trusts. The heart that has been waiting so long, it has almost forgotten what it is waiting for, but still, in its deepest place, has not let go. That thread, that quality of persistent, unpolished, sometimes exhausted faithfulness is what I want to trace forward now into the territory of what actually happens when God decides to move. Not the theory of it, not the theology of it. As important as theology is, the lived experience of it. The moment when the season of formation gives way to the season of manifestation. The moment when the frequency that has been building in the hidden place suddenly becomes visible in the open place. Because chosen ones do not stay hidden forever. They are prepared in hiddenness, yes. They are formed in the secret place, yes. But they are always released into the open. And the release, when it comes, does not look the way most people expect it to look. I want to bring Hannah back into the room for a moment, because her story did not end with the birth of her son Samuel. It continued. And the continuation is what I need you to see right now. Because after Samuel was born, after the answer to her years of prayer arrived, Hannah did something that most people in her position would not have done. She gave him back. She had prayed for a son. She had received a son. And then she walked back to the same temple where she had poured out her grief, and she placed that son into the hands of the God who had given him to her. She said, "I asked the Lord for him, and He has granted me what I asked of Him. So now I give him to the Lord. For his whole life he will be given over to the Lord." I want you to feel the weight of that moment. Because what Hannah understood, in a way that chosen ones eventually have to learn, is that the things God gives us are not ultimately for us. They are given through us, for a purpose larger than our personal satisfaction. Samuel did not belong to Hannah in the way the world thinks of belonging. He belonged to God, and Hannah was the vessel through which God brought him into the world, and the altar through which God received him back. And Samuel, released into the hands of God by a mother who understood that surrender is not loss but completion, went on to become one of the most significant prophetic voices in the entire history of Israel. He anointed kings. He heard the voice of God in the night when even the priest Eli could not recognize it. He stood at the hinge points of history and spoke what heaven gave him to speak. None of that would have been possible if Hannah had held on. None of that would have been possible if she had mistaken the gift for the destination. And this is one of the most important things that chosen ones must learn in the season between preparation and release. The things you have been given, the gifts, the insights, the creative capacities, the frequency itself are not the destination. They are the vehicle. They are the means by which God intends to move through you into a world that desperately needs what you carry. And the moment you begin to hold them with open hands rather than clenched fists, the moment you begin to offer them back to the one who gave them rather than hoarding them out of fear that they might be taken, that is the moment the fullness of your assignment begins to come online. But here is where the story takes a turn that I need you to pay very close attention to, because this is the part that changes everything. After Hannah released Samuel, after she made the most costly act of surrender in her story, the Bible does not record that she went home empty. It records that God honored her faithfulness with more. She went on to have 3 more sons and 2 daughters. The release did not diminish her, it multiplied her. The surrender did not leave her with less. It opened her to receive more than she had originally asked for. Because that is the economy of heaven. It does not operate on the world's logic of scarcity, where giving something away means having less of it. It operates on the logic of the kingdom, where releasing what you have been given in obedience and trust creates the conditions for a multiplication that your original asking never anticipated. You are standing at that kind of threshold right now. Not necessarily in the specific way Hannah stood at hers, but in the essential shape of it. There is something in your life that God is asking you to release, not necessarily a person or a tangible thing. It might be a version of yourself that you have been clinging to. It might be a plan you have been holding on to so tightly that there is no room in your hands for the better thing God is trying to give you. It might be a timeline you have decided on, a way you have told yourself the story of your life has to go, a door you keep returning to, even though God closed it because you have not yet made peace with the closing. Whatever it is, you know what it is. The frequency inside you is already pointing at it. That low-grade resistance, that particular tension that activates when you get quiet enough to feel it, that is the thing. That is the place where your next release is waiting to happen. And the courage to make that release does not come from willpower. It does not come from having fully worked through the grief of letting go. It comes from the same place Hannah's courage came from. It comes from an encounter with God that is real enough, and close enough, and undeniable enough, that surrender stops feeling like loss and starts feeling like the most natural response in the world to the presence of someone so much larger and wiser and more faithful than you. That encounter is available to you right now, in this moment. Not in some future season when you are more spiritually prepared, or more emotionally healed, or more certain of your footing. Right now, in the middle of wherever you actually are, the presence that met Hannah in the temple is present in whatever room you are sitting in. The book of Psalms speaks to this with a simplicity that cuts through every layer of theological complexity and lands directly in the human heart. Psalm 34, verse 18. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. Close, not distant. Not requiring you to cross some vast spiritual distance before He will meet you. Close, already in the room, already aware of every specific weight you carried into this moment, already acquainted with the full complexity of your situation in a way that no human being, no matter how wise or well-intentioned, could ever fully be. And that closeness is not conditional on your performance or your consistency or your ability to feel it on any given day. It is a declaration of His nature, not a reward for yours. He is close to the brokenhearted. If that describes you today, then the promise is specifically and personally for you. You do not need to qualify for it. You already meet the only criterion it requires. Now, I want to speak to the part of your journey that is about to shift. because we have spent time in the territory of preparation and waiting, and the hidden work of formation, and that territory has been real and necessary and honest. But chosen ones do not live permanently in the waiting room. There comes a moment in every chosen one's story where the preparation is complete enough, where the formation has gone deep enough, where the frequency has been tuned and clarified and strengthened through enough seasons of pressure and surrender that heaven looks at what has been built and says, "It is time." And when heaven says it is time, what follows is not gradual. It is not incremental. It is the kind of shift that reframes everything that came before it. The kind of movement that makes the length of the waiting make sudden luminous sense. That moment is closer for you than your current circumstances are suggesting. The gap between where you are and where you are going is not as wide as the silence has made it feel. The frequency that has been building in the hidden place is about to find its expression in the open place. The investment of pain and faithfulness and persistent surrender that you have been making in the secret is about to begin paying dividends in the visible. Not because you finally did everything right, but because the God who called you is faithful. And the God who is faithful does not prepare chosen ones for assignments He does not intend to release them into. You were built for what is coming. Every season of your life has been calibrating you for it. And the calibration, chosen one, is nearly complete. Everything that has been spoken over you in this message, every word that has landed in that deep place inside your chest, where the real knowing lives, has been moving toward this moment. Not the moment of a transaction or a decision or an action item on a list. The moment of recognition, the moment where you look at the full arc of what God has been doing in your life, the waiting and the wait, and the formation and the frequency, and the slow, faithful, sometimes agonizing process of becoming who you were always meant to be. And you begin to see it not as a collection of disconnected experiences, but as a single, coherent, intentional story. A story that was being written by hands far more skilled and far more loving than any circumstance you have walked through would have suggested. A story that is not finished. A story that is, in fact, just now arriving at one of its most significant chapters. And I want to talk to you about what it means to step into that chapter with your full self. Not the edited version of you that you present to the world when you are not sure how much of yourself is safe to bring. Not the managed version that keeps the most powerful parts of your frequency dialed down to a level that feels less threatening to the people around you. The full version. The version that Hannah became after the altar. The version that did not shrink back from the magnitude of what God had done and what God had asked, but stood in the temple and sang and prophesied and declared the nature of a God whose ways are higher than anything human logic can contain. That version of you. The one who knows, the one who carries. The one who was never meant to hide. Stepping into that version requires something the world rarely celebrates, but heaven consistently honors. It requires you to stop waiting for permission from your circumstances before you begin to move. So many chosen ones are living in a holding pattern, waiting for the external confirmation, the open door, the unmistakable sign, the moment when everything lines up so perfectly that forward movement feels completely safe and completely risk-free. And while God does confirm and does open doors and does give signs, He also asks chosen ones to move before the full picture is clear. He asks them to take the step that is available right now, with the clarity they currently have, trusting that the next step will become visible in the act of taking this one. That is not recklessness. That is the specific kind of faith that God has always honored in the people He has called to carry the most significant assignments. Hannah did not wait until she fully understood what she was giving away before she gave Samuel back. She did not wait until she had processed every layer of grief and every theological question about why God would ask her to return the very thing she had prayed for. She acted from the place of encounter, from the place where she had met God closely enough and truly enough that obedience felt more like relief than sacrifice. And that action, taken in faith before the full picture was clear, unleashed a chain of events that neither she nor anyone around her could have predicted or engineered through their own strategy or effort. You are being called to that kind of movement right now. Not to manufacture it, not to perform it, not to do something dramatic for the sake of appearing spiritually bold, but to take the next honest step that is in front of you. To say yes to the thing that has been quietly asking for your yes for longer than you have been willing to admit. To show up in the space where your frequency is needed and let the light that God placed inside you do what it was always designed to do, without apologizing for its brightness, without dimming it to make the room more comfortable, without waiting for someone else to validate what heaven has already confirmed. And as you step into that, I want to talk about the community that surrounds this message. Because chosen ones were not designed to move alone. The frequency inside you is powerful in isolation, but it is exponential in community. There is something that happens when chosen ones find each other, when people who have been carrying the same invisible weight and the same deep frequency begin to recognize each other and hold space for each other in the particular way that only people who truly understand can. This channel, this space, this ongoing conversation that we are building together across every message and every moment of connection is that kind of community. It is not a perfect community. No human community ever is, but it is a real one. A community of people who have felt the weight and the frequency and the calling and who are choosing together to lean into it rather than away from it. If this message has reached something real in you today, if something we have spoken together has shifted or stirred or confirmed or awakened something that needed to be touched, I want to invite you to do something simple and yet significant, like this video. Not as a hollow gesture of digital approval, but as an act of agreement, as a way of saying, I was here, this reached me, I receive it and share it. Not because the numbers matter in themselves, but because you know, better than most, what it feels like to be in a season where you desperately needed to hear something true and could not find it. Someone in your life is in that season right now. Someone in your circle is carrying the weight we described in section 2, sitting at the altar Hannah sat at, feeling alone in a way they cannot fully articulate. And the simple act of sharing this message could be the thing that makes them feel, for the first time in a long time, that someone sees them and that heaven has not forgotten their address. Subscribe to this channel if you have not already, not to inflate a number on a screen, but to stay connected to the ongoing conversation. Because what we have covered today is not the whole message. It is the beginning of a conversation that goes deeper with every new message, every new layer, every new territory we explore together. The frequency that has been awakened in you today needs continued input, continued activation, continued community to sustain and grow into its full expression. And this is one of the places where that can happen. This is one of the spaces that has been built with the specific intention of serving the chosen ones, the ones who feel the weight and carry the frequency, and are trying to figure out how to live faithfully in the gap between the promise and its fulfillment. There is also a donate link in the description and the pinned comment below. I want to be transparent with you about what that means and what it is for. This work, the research and the preparation, and the time and the intention that goes into every message is sustained by the generosity of the community that it serves. If this message has added value to your life today, if it has given you something real that you will carry forward, and if you are in a season where you are able to give something back, that link is the doorway. Not because your worth in this community is tied to whether you give or how much. It is not. You belong here fully regardless. But because generosity is itself a frequency. Because the act of giving from a place of genuine gratitude is one of the most powerful ways of declaring to heaven that you believe the supply is not running out, that you are not operating from scarcity, that you trust the economy of the kingdom over the economy of the world. And that declaration has its own way of opening things in the invisible realm that then manifests in the visible. I want you to know something that I mean with my whole heart as I speak it. This message was not created for an audience. It was created for you, specifically, personally, intentionally, for the person who would find their way to it in this exact moment of their life. Every word was chosen with the awareness that real people with real struggles and real questions and real freight would receive it, and that what was spoken here would either add to their weight or help them carry it differently. My deepest desire is that it has done the latter, that you are leaving this section lighter than you entered it, not because the circumstances have changed, but because something in your understanding of yourself and your story and your God has shifted in a way that changes how you carry what has not yet changed. The people who walk beside you in this journey matter. The voices that speak truth into your frequency matter. The community that holds space for your becoming matters. And you, chosen one, matter more than any metric or number or measure that this platform uses to evaluate significance. You matter because you were made. You matter because you were chosen. You matter because the God who spoke the world into existence looked at the specific constellation of gifts and wounds and callings and questions that make up the person you are and decided deliberately and joyfully that the world needed exactly that. Exactly you. Not a better version of you, not a more polished or more certain or more spiritually together version of you. You. Right now. In this season, with everything you are carrying and everything you have not yet figured out and everything you are still becoming. Stay connected, chosen one. The conversation is just getting deeper. There is a particular kind of silence that chosen ones know intimately. Not the silence of peace, though peace will come. Not the silence of emptiness, though it can feel that way from the inside. It is the silence that arrives after the altar moment, after the surrender, after the frequency has been stirred and awakened, and you have said yes to the thing that heaven has been asking of you, and then the room goes quiet in a way that feels almost unbearable. The world does not move immediately. The circumstances do not rearrange themselves overnight. The door does not swing open the morning after you decided to trust, and in that space, in that particular quality of holy waiting that follows genuine surrender, the chosen one faces what may be the most difficult test of the entire journey. Not the test of suffering, because suffering at least has the dignity of being loud. The test of stillness. The test of trusting in a silence that gives you nothing to hold on to except the word that was spoken before the silence began. Hannah knew this silence. She walked out of the temple after giving Samuel back, and she returned to her ordinary life. She went home. She resumed the rhythms of daily existence in a world that did not know what had just happened between her and God in that sacred interior moment. And the people around her, the same people who had watched her weep and misunderstood her prayer, and perhaps wondered quietly Whether her grief was a sign of spiritual deficiency, those same people had no framework for the transaction that had just taken place. They could not see what had been exchanged at the altar. They could not perceive the shift that had occurred in the invisible realm. And so, Hannah lived for a time in the silence between the surrender and the manifestation, carrying the weight of something that had not yet become visible, trusting the word of a God whose timing is never synchronized with human impatience. That silence is sacred. I want you to hear that clearly and let it reach the place in you that has been interpreting the silence as absence. The silence is not absence. The silence is preparation of a different kind, not the preparation that happens in you. The formation of character and depth and frequency that we have already spoken about at length, but the preparation that happens around you, in the invisible architecture of your circumstances, in the repositioning of people and opportunities and moments that need to be in place before the door can open in a way that serves the fullness of your assignment rather than just the urgency of your desire. God is not slow. God is precise. And precision sometimes requires a silence that feels, from inside the waiting, indistinguishable from abandonment. The Psalms of David understand this silence in a way that almost no other literature in the history of human expression has matched. David, who was anointed as king while he was still a shepherd boy, who was chosen and marked and set apart by the prophet Samuel himself, with oil running down his face as a public declaration of divine selection, then spent years running for his life from the very king he was meant to replace. He lived in caves. He hid in the wilderness. He gathered around him a band of men who were described in Scripture as distressed, in debt, and discontented. Not exactly the founding team you would choose for a dynasty. And in those caves, in that wilderness, in that long season between the anointing and the throne, David wrote some of the most profound poetry about the silence of God that the human heart has ever produced. He did not write from a distance. He wrote from inside it, from the specific texture of lying in the dark and listening for a voice that did not seem to be coming, from the experience of crying out and hearing nothing immediately return, from the particular anguish of a chosen one who knows what he was called to and cannot yet inhabit it, surrounded by circumstances that seem not just indifferent to the promise but actively hostile to it. David knew that silence, and yet, woven through every psalm that emerged from those cave years, even the ones that begin in the deepest anguish, there is a thread of something that never fully breaks. A thread of remembrance. A thread of choosing, deliberately and sometimes painfully, to rehearse what God has done, rather than only cataloging what God has not yet done. To speak the nature of God back to himself in the darkness, not because the darkness had lifted, but because the nature of God does not change with the quality of the light. Psalm 46 verse 10, "Be still and know that I am God." Be still. In a world that interprets stillness as passivity, that reads silence as stagnation, that measures the value of a season by how much visible movement it contains, the command to be still is one of the most countercultural, most difficult, and most necessary instructions that heaven ever gives to a chosen one. Because stillness is not inaction. Stillness is the specific posture that makes it possible to receive what cannot be received in motion. It is the frequency state that allows the signal to come through clearly, without the interference of our own noise and our own striving and our own attempts to manage the outcome of a story that was never ours to control. Be still, not forever, not as a permanent resignation to whatever is, but as a deliberate, chosen, practiced orientation toward the God who is speaking in the register that only stillness can access. And know that I am God. That second clause is the anchor, because the command to be still only makes sense in the context of the certainty it is attached to. Be still and know. Not believe, not hope, not tentatively wonder. Know. The kind of knowing that is not dependent on what you can see or feel or measure in a given moment. The kind of knowing that lives deeper than your circumstances, and steadier than your emotions, and quieter than your fears. The kind of knowing that David cultivated in the caves, not by having his questions answered, but by choosing to rehearse the character of a God he had encountered closely enough and truly enough that the encounter itself became the evidence he stood on, when evidence of any other kind was nowhere to be found. This is the specific spiritual discipline of the chosen one in the season of silence. Not to manufacture feeling, not to perform certainty you do not actually have, but to practice the deliberate, daily, sometimes moment-by-moment choice to orient yourself toward what you know rather than toward what you feel. To say, I do not know when the door will open. I do not know how the circumstance will change. I do not know the mechanism by which the promise will be fulfilled, but I know who holds the promise. I know the character of the one who made it. I know that the same God who brought water from a rock and parted a sea and turned a shepherd boy into a king and answered a woman's wordless prayer in a temple is the same God who is present in this silence with me right now. And that knowledge, held steadily and rehearsed faithfully, and returned to again and again in the moments when the silence feels loudest, is itself a form of worship that moves heaven in ways that the most eloquent and articulate prayers do not always reach. The silence before the roar is real. Every chosen one who has ever lived through the gap between promise and fulfillment has had to learn to inhabit it. And the inhabiting is never comfortable. There will be days in the silence when the doubt is louder than the faith. Days when the circumstances stack up against the promise in a way that seems not just discouraging, but mathematically conclusive. Days when you are tired of explaining to yourself and to others why you still believe what you believe in the face of everything that seems to contradict it. Those days are not failures of faith. They are the texture of genuine faith. Faith that has never been tested by real silence is not faith. It is spiritual comfort. The real thing is forged in exactly the kind of pressure and darkness and uncertainty that you have been living through. David knew that the anointing was real. The oil had been poured. The prophet had spoken. And yet the throne was not his, and the king was hunting him. And the caves were cold, and the men around him were desperate and discontented. And still he wrote, I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. Not because everything was going well, because he had decided in the silence and the wilderness and the cold of the cave that the nature of God was more real than the nature of his circumstances, that the promise was more durable than the pressure, that the anointing that had been placed on him was not dependent on the cooperation of a world that did not yet recognize it. That decision, the decision to praise before the breakthrough, to worship in the wilderness, to speak the goodness of God in the cave before the throne is in sight, is the decision that accelerates the transition from the silence to the roar, not because it manipulates God into moving faster. God does not operate on a schedule that human impatience can speed up, but because the posture of worship in the wilderness is the posture of a heart that has genuinely released control, and a heart that has genuinely released. Control is a heart that heaven can trust with the fullness of what is coming, because the fullness of what is coming requires a vessel that will not be destroyed by it, or distorted by it, or so overwhelmed by it that they forget who gave it. The silence is making you that vessel. The wilderness is building that capacity. And the roar, when it comes, will be proportional to the depth of the stillness that preceded it. Be still, chosen one, and know. The silence is not the end of your story. It is the breath before the most powerful sentence of it. You have been still long enough to hear what the silence was saying. And now I want to speak to something that is shifting in you, even as you receive these words. Something that has been quietly moving beneath the surface of everything we have covered together. A momentum that has been building in the invisible realm with every section, every truth, every moment of recognition that landed somewhere deeper than your mind and reached the place where your actual life is lived and your actual decisions are made. Because there comes a point in every chosen one's journey where the season of stillness gives way to the season of movement. Not frantic movement, not the kind of movement driven by impatience or fear or the need to prove that you have not been wasting time in the wilderness, but the kind of deliberate, grounded, heaven-directed movement that comes from a person who has been still long enough to know which direction they are being sent. David understood this transition better than almost anyone whose story is recorded in Scripture. He had been in the cave. He had written the Psalms. He had practiced the worship in the wilderness and cultivated the stillness, and chosen again and again to rehearse the nature of God rather than the nature of his circumstances. And then there came a moment, a specific, unrepeatable, hinge point moment that tested everything the wilderness had been building in him. The moment where his response would reveal whether the formation had gone deep enough, whether the character that God had been developing in the silence was real enough to hold under the kind of pressure that only a genuinely high-stakes moment can produce. Saul, the king who had been hunting David, who had spent years trying to eliminate the very man God had chosen to replace him, entered the cave where David and his men were hiding. And in that cave, in that extraordinary collision of vulnerability and power, David had the opportunity to end the pursuit once and for all. His men recognized it immediately. They told him that God had delivered his enemy into his hands. The logic was undeniable. The opportunity was perfect, and David had every human reason to take it. Every wound Saul had inflicted, every night in the wilderness, every year of displacement and danger, and the grinding exhaustion of living as a fugitive when you know you were anointed for a throne. All of it pointed toward one conclusion: take the moment, end it, step into what is rightfully yours. But David did not take it. He cut the corner of Saul's robe in the darkness, and even that small act troubled his conscience. He said to his men, "The Lord forbid that I should do such a thing to my master, the Lord's anointed, to lay my hand on him, for he is the anointed of the Lord." And he held his men back and let Saul walk out of the cave alive. In the moment where everything in the natural world was saying take, David chose to release. In the moment where the wound was freshest and the opportunity was clearest and the justification was most readily available, David chose obedience over impulse. He chose to trust that the God who had anointed him did not need him to seize what God had already promised, that the throne that was his by divine appointment did not need to be taken by human force, that the timing of God did not require the compromise of David's integrity to be fulfilled. That choice, made in a dark cave in a moment of extraordinary pressure, is what separated David from every other capable, gifted, ambitious man of his generation. Not the anointing alone, not the skill alone, not even the Psalms or the worship or the years of wilderness formation alone, but the choice in the specific moment of maximum temptation to honor God above his own justified desire, to release the outcome rather than seize it, to trust the promise more than the opportunity. And heaven recorded that choice. Heaven does not miss the moments where a chosen one chooses obedience in the dark, when no one is watching and every human instinct is pointing in the opposite direction. Those moments are not lost. They are not wasted. They are deposited into an account that heaven maintains on behalf of every chosen one who has ever trusted God in a cave, and they draw interest in the invisible realm long before they manifest as change in the visible one. I want to speak to you now about your own cave moment, because every chosen one has one. Not necessarily a dramatic, cinematic encounter like David's, though some of you have faced moments that were genuinely that acute. But the essential shape of it, the moment where the wounded self and the obedient self are standing at a crossroads, and the choice between them has real consequences, is universal to the chosen one experience. Your cave moment might be the decision to forgive someone who has not asked for it and does not deserve it by any human measure. It might be the choice to release a grievance that you have every right to hold, to let go of a narrative of victimhood that is keeping you anchored to a past that God has already moved beyond. It might be the decision to speak with integrity in a moment where a more convenient version of the truth would serve your immediate interests better. Whatever the shape of your cave moment, the principle is the same. Heaven is watching, not in the way of surveillance or judgment, but in the way of a father who is watching his child take the most important step of their development, whose heart is fully engaged in the outcome, who knows that this moment is not just about the immediate situation, but about what it reveals and what it builds and what it releases in the life of the one being tested. Your choices in the hidden moments, the ones no one else sees, the ones where the only witness is the God who sees everything, are the choices that most decisively shape the trajectory of your assignment. Because the authority that God releases to chosen ones is always proportional to the integrity they have demonstrated. In the moments where compromise would have been completely understandable, the platform is proportional to the character. The influence is proportional to the surrender. The magnitude of what is released through you is proportional to the depth of what has been built in you. And what has been built in you is revealed most clearly, not in the public moments, but in the private ones. In the cave, when no one is watching, when the cost of obedience is real and the benefit of compromise is immediate, and the choice between them is genuinely difficult. David's choice in the cave did not immediately change his circumstances. He still left the cave as a fugitive. Saul still lived. The throne was still not his. But something shifted in the invisible realm that day that began the final movement toward the fulfillment of everything that had been promised. Because heaven had seen what it needed to see. The character had held under the ultimate pressure. The integrity had not collapsed when integrity was most expensive. And the God who had been watching, who had been with David in every cave and every wilderness night and every psalm written in the dark, said, Now the time has come. Now the vessel is ready for what was always intended to be poured into it. Your now is coming, chosen one. The cave is not the destination. It is the final examination before the graduation, and the examining is nearly complete. I want to ask you to do something right now as a declaration of your agreement with what heaven is speaking over your life in this moment. Something simple, something brief, something that costs you only a few seconds, but carries the weight of a genuine spiritual act of alignment. In the comments right now, type these 4 words. I trust the process, not as a hollow affirmation or a motivational hashtag, but as a genuine declaration of the same posture that David chose in the cave. The posture that says, I do not need to seize what God has promised. I do not need to force the timing or manufacture the outcome or compromise my integrity to accelerate a fulfillment that heaven has already set in motion. I trust the process, because the God who authored the process has never lost a chosen one who stayed faithful through it. Type it now. I trust the process. Let it be your cave moment declaration. Let it be the words that mark the day you chose, like David, to honor the promise above the opportunity and to trust the one who made it more than the circumstances that seem to contradict it. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 36. You need to persevere so that when you have done the will of God, you will receive what He has promised. Persevere, not perform, not achieve, not force. Persevere, keep going, keep trusting. Keep showing up in the cave with your integrity intact and your hands open and your heart still oriented toward the God who sees you and knows you and has not, for a single moment of your entire journey, lost sight of what He placed inside you and what He intends to do through you. The promise is real, the timing is precise, and the chosen one who perseveres will receive it. And that perseverance, the specific quality of faithful forward movement, that does not require perfect conditions or complete clarity or the absence of doubt, is exactly what carries you into the territory we are about to enter together. Because we have walked through, and the weight of frequency, and the science, and the surrender, and the silence, and the cave. We have named the signs of the chosen one, and sat with Hannah at the altar, and watched David make the decision that heaven was waiting for. And now, in the space that all of that has been preparing, there is one more layer that needs to be spoken. One more truth that sits beneath everything else we have uncovered, deeper than the formation, and deeper than the frequency, and deeper than even the assignment itself. It is the truth about where all of this began. Not in your childhood, not in the season that first marked you as different, not even in the moment of your first genuine encounter with God, but before any of that, before the world had a name for you, before your story had a beginning that you could point to. This is where we are going next, and it will change the way you see everything. Before you were born, before your mother knew your name, before the first breath ever filled your lungs, or the first sound ever reached your ears, there was a conversation happening about you. Not a casual conversation, not a divine afterthought or a secondary consideration in a universe full of more pressing cosmic business. A deliberate, intentional, specific conversation in which the God who spoke galaxies into existence turned His full attention toward the particular person you would become, and made a declaration that has never been revoked, never been amended, never been weakened by anything you have done or failed to do in all the years since you drew that first breath. He looked at you, fully and completely, with the knowledge of every chapter of your story already open before Him, every mistake already visible, every failure already accounted for, every season of doubt and distance and wandering already known. And He said, I want that one. I choose that one. That one is mine. That is not a comfortable truth for people who have built their understanding of their own worth on performance. Because performance-based worth requires you to earn your place, to justify your selection, to maintain a level of output that keeps you on the right side of the ledger. And if your relationship with your own value has been built on that foundation, then the idea that you were chosen, before you had any opportunity to perform, before you had demonstrated anything, before you had proven yourself in any arena, can feel almost destabilizing, because it removes the one thing that the performance-based mind uses to maintain a sense of control over its own worth, the ability to earn it. But that destabilization, that removal of the illusion of earned worth, is not a threat to your identity. It is the foundation of it. Because an identity that rests on performance is always one bad season away from collapse, one failure away from crisis, one long silence away from the terrifying conclusion that maybe the selection was a mistake, that maybe the promise was for someone else, that maybe you read the signs wrong, and the choosing was never really about you. But an identity that rests on the sovereign, unconditional, pre-performance choice of a God who does not make mistakes and does not change his mind, that identity can survive anything. It can survive the cave. It can survive the silence. It can survive the seasons where your output is low and your doubt is high, and the distance between the promise and the reality feels not just wide but permanent, because it is not resting on what you have done. It is resting on what he decided, and what he decided before the world began. David understood this, not immediately and not without struggle, but deeply and eventually, in a way that becomes one of the most breathtaking moments of personal revelation in all of Scripture. In the 139th Psalm, written from the inside of a life that had included both extraordinary highs and devastating lows, both the anointing and the cave, both the throne and the betrayal, both the worship and the moral failure and the grief and the restoration, David writes something so intimate and so precise that it reads less like theology and more like a man who has finally, after everything, understood the ground he has always been standing on. Psalm 139, verse 13 to 14. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. You knit me together. That phrase carries more weight than its simplicity suggests. Knitting is not a mechanical process. It is not the output of a factory or the result of a formula. It is a craft. It is the work of hands that are paying attention, hands that are making deliberate choices about every thread, every stitch, every connection between one element and the next. And the one doing the knitting in David's declaration is not a craftsman who got distracted halfway through or ran out of the right materials or made do with what was available. It is the God who lacks nothing, who makes no mistakes, who does not produce anything accidentally, and who was giving his full creative attention to the specific, unrepeatable, never to be duplicated person that you are. In the exact moment of your formation, before you had any awareness of being formed. Every part of you that you have questioned, every aspect of yourself that you have wished was different, every dimension of your personality or your sensitivity or your depth or your intensity that the world has at various points tried to convince you was too much or not enough, was a deliberate stitch, a chosen thread, a specific decision made by hands that knew exactly what they were building and why. The sensitivity that makes you feel everything so deeply was not an accident of temperament that you have had to manage around. It was knitted in, deliberately, because the assignment you carry requires a depth of feeling that shallower people cannot access. The intensity that has sometimes made relationships complicated was not a manufacturing defect. It was a design feature, built for a purpose that your ordinary life has not yet fully revealed, but that your deepest moments of clarity have always pointed toward. And the things that feel like flaws, the wounds that never fully healed, the places where you are most aware of your own insufficiency, those are not evidence of careless craftsmanship. They are the places where the grace of God is most visible, because grace, by definition, shines brightest in the places where human strength runs out. The Apostle Paul understood this when he wrote about his own thorn, his own unresolved limitation, and recorded God's response, not as a promise to remove it, but as a revelation of the principle behind it. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. The weakness is not a design flaw that God is working around. It is the specific condition that makes the power of God most undeniably visible in your life, both to you and to everyone watching. Hannah carried what looked like a flaw for years, a closed womb in a culture where a woman's worth was measured in large part by her ability to bear children. That limitation was not an oversight in her design. It was the specific condition that drew her to the altar, that produced the depth of dependence and the quality of prayer that unlocked the prophetic capacity that then flowed through Samuel, the son of that prayer, into the entire history of Israel. The limitation was the doorway. Wound was the place where the story turned, and the same is true for you. The promise that was spoken over you before you were born has not expired. It has not been transferred to someone more qualified or more consistent or more spiritually impressive. It is still yours, still active, still being worked toward in the invisible realm with the same intention and the same precision and the same love that it was first spoken with, before you had any awareness of being known. And the length of the journey between the speaking of the promise and the fulfillment of it is not evidence of God's indifference. It is evidence of the magnitude of what is being prepared. Small promises are fulfilled quickly. The promises that require the longest preparation are the ones that carry the greatest weight, the ones that will touch the most lives, the ones that will produce the most significant reversal of what darkness intended for your story. You were not designed for a small life, not in the sense of geography or fame or financial measurement, because the kingdom of God does not rank significance by any of those metrics. Small by the world's measure can be enormous by heaven's, but small in the sense of impact, small in the sense of reach, small in the sense of the number of people who will be different because you existed, because you said yes, because you carried your frequency faithfully through the cave and the silence and wait and the altar, and you arrived at your assignment, not perfectly but genuinely, not without scars, but with the scars fully integrated into the story rather than hidden from it. The promise spoken over you before you were born was always a large promise. It always required a large preparation. And the preparation, every season of it, every layer of it, every painful and disorienting and refining chapter of it has been perfectly calibrated to the size of what is coming. Not one season was wasted. Not one tear was unaccounted for. Not one night in the cave produced nothing. Everything has been contributing to the formation of a vessel large enough and strong enough and surrendered enough to carry what heaven intends to pour into it, and through it and out of it into a world that is waiting, whether it knows it or not, for exactly what you were made to bring. The conversation that began before your birth has never ended. God is still speaking over you, still declaring what He declared when He first knit you together with intention and care and the full weight of His creative attention. Still saying, I choose that one. Still saying, that one is mine. Still saying, the promise I spoke over, that life is active and real and moving toward its fulfillment with a precision and a faithfulness that nothing in heaven or earth has the power to derail. You were chosen before the foundations of the world. You were known before you were formed. You were loved before you had any capacity to love in return. And the story that began with that choosing, that knowing, that loving is not finished. It is not even close to finished. It is arriving, chosen one. Right now, in this moment, in this season, in this exact configuration of your life, with all its unresolved questions, and all its unfinished chapters, and all its still tender places. It is arriving. And the one who spoke the promise before you were born is the same one who will be standing at the fulfillment of it. The same one who has been with you in every chapter between the speaking and the arriving. The same one whose faithfulness has never once been contingent on yours. The promise was spoken before you began, and it will be fulfilled before your story ends. You have traveled a long way to reach this moment. Not just through this message, though. The journey through these sections has been real, and the ground we have covered together has been significant. But the longer journey, the one that began before you had any awareness of being on a journey at all, the one that has included every season we have named together in this conversation, the wait and the wilderness, and the altar, and the cave, and the silence, and the promise spoken before your first breath. You have traveled through all of it to arrive at this exact point, this exact moment, this exact configuration of your life, where everything that has been built in the hidden place is ready, finally and fully, to step into the light. And I want you to sit with that for a moment before we go any further. Not the sitting of passivity or resignation, or the exhausted collapse of someone who has been waiting so long, they have stopped expecting anything to happen. The sitting of a chosen one who has done the work, who has stayed faithful through the silence, who has held the frequency when the interference was loudest, who has made the David choice in the cave and the Hannah choice at the altar, and who now, standing at the threshold of what is coming, takes one deliberate breath and says, I am ready. Not ready in the sense of having no more questions or no more fears or no more places where the uncertainty is real. Ready in the sense of having said yes to the God who called you, having released the outcome to the hands that hold it, having decided that the promise is more real than the pressure, and the faithfulness of the one who spoke it is more durable than anything that has tried to contradict it. This is the moment, not a moment in the future when the circumstances finally cooperate, not a moment contingent on the resolution of everything that is still unresolved. This moment, the one you are in right now, because chosen ones do not step into their fullness on the other side of their breakthrough. They step into it in the decision to trust, in the posture of surrender, in the act of receiving what heaven has been trying to give them, and saying yes to it with their whole self, rather than the carefully managed portion they have decided is safe enough to offer. David was anointed in an ordinary field, surrounded by brothers who were not chosen, by a prophet who almost made the wrong selection because he was looking at the outside rather than the inside. Samuel looked at the tall, impressive older brothers and thought, surely this is the one. But God said to him, do not look at his appearance or his height. The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. And then the youngest came in from the field, the one nobody had even thought to call, the one who was out doing the ordinary work while the extraordinary moment was happening inside, and heaven said, rise and anoint him. This is the one. You are the one that heaven pointed to when the room was full of more obvious candidates. You are the one who was called in from the field while others were already positioned and prepared and presenting themselves. And the oil that was poured over David in that field, that moment of divine selection that looked entirely unremarkable from the outside, but was shifting everything in the invisible realm, is the same oil that has been poured over your life in the moments that nobody saw, in the quiet encounters with God that left no visible evidence but changed everything about the trajectory of what was coming. The fullness of your assignment is not waiting for you on the other side of a mountain you have not yet climbed. It is waiting for you in the next faithful step, the next honest prayer, the next moment of choosing obedience over comfort, trust over fear, the voice of heaven over the noise of everything that has been trying to convince you that you are ordinary. you are not ordinary. You have never been ordinary. And the season that is opening before you now is going to make that undeniable in ways that will silence every voice that ever suggested otherwise. I want to pray over you now, not as a religious formality or a way of closing out a message with the expected spiritual punctuation, but as a genuine act of intercession for the specific person you are, in the specific season you are in, carrying the specific weight and the specific promise and the specific frequency that God placed inside you before the world had any opportunity to tell you who you were or were not. I want to speak over you the kind of prayer that Hannah prayed at the altar, the kind that comes not from performance, but from the deepest place of genuine desire for the person receiving it. Father, I bring before you the one who has traveled this far, the one who has been still enough and honest enough and hungry enough to receive every word that has been spoken in this message. You know who they are with a completeness that no human being can approach. You know the weight they carried into this moment, and the questions that are still unresolved, and the places where the hope has been worn thin by the length of the waiting. And you know the promise you spoke over them before they were born, the one that has never expired, the one that is still active and still moving toward its fulfillment, with a precision and a faithfulness that nothing has the power to stop. I ask you now to do what only you can do, to reach into the places in this person that human words cannot touch and do the work that only your presence can accomplish. Heal what has been broken in the waiting. Restore what has been lost in the wilderness. Reunite what has grown dim in the silence, and release in them, right now, the full awareness of who they are in you, not who they hope to become, not who they are working toward, who they already are in the decree of heaven, in the declaration you made before the foundations of this world, in the choosing that was never based on their performance, but on your sovereign, unfailing, immovable love. Strengthen them for what is coming, not just the breakthrough, but the weight of the blessing. Not just the opening of the door, but the responsibility of what is on the other side of it. Build in them a character that can sustain the fullness of the assignment without being corrupted by it, or consumed by it, or distorted by it. Make them the kind of vessel that can hold what you intend to pour, that can carry what you intend to release, that can steward with faithfulness and humility and continued surrender everything that is about to shift in their favor. And in the moments ahead, when the old doubts rise and the old fears knock and the silence returns, as it sometimes will even after the breakthrough, remind them of this moment. Remind them of the frequency that was awakened here. Remind them of the promise that was spoken before their birth that has never been revoked. Remind them that you are close to the brokenhearted, that you see the one who perseveres in the cave, that you remember the one who keeps coming to the altar even when the altar seems to give nothing back. Let this moment be a stone of remembrance in their story, a marker they can return to when they need to recall that they were here, and they were seen, and they were spoken over by a God who does not forget the ones He has chosen. Go before them, Father. Make the crooked places straight and the rough places smooth. Open doors that no human hand can close, and close doors that no human argument can reopen. Align the people and the moments and the opportunities with the precision that only you can orchestrate. And let every step of what is coming be marked by the undeniable signature of your faithfulness, so that when they arrive at the fulfillment of what was promised, there is no confusion about who made it happen, and no temptation to give the glory to anyone other than you. Over this chosen one, I speak completion. I speak release. I speak the full activation of everything that has been prepared in the hidden place. I speak the courage to step into the open place without apology and without shrinking. I speak the peace that passes understanding into every unresolved place, and the joy that is not dependent on circumstances into every weary place. And I speak the love of God, wide enough to cover every failure, deep enough to reach every wound, strong enough to hold through every storm, and faithful enough to see this chosen one all the way home. In the name that is above every name, Amen. Chosen one, you are not leaving this message the same way you arrived. Something has shifted. Something has been spoken over you that the invisible realm has recorded, and that heaven is already responding to. Carry it forward. Carry it into the ordinary moments of your week, the Tuesday mornings and the difficult conversations, and the quiet spaces where the real work of your becoming continues to happen. Carry the frequency, carry the promise, carry the awareness of being known and chosen and held by a God whose faithfulness has never once been contingent on your performance. If this message has added something real to your life today, I want to gently invite you to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear that they are not alone in what they are carrying. Subscribe to stay connected to this ongoing conversation, because what we have covered today is one layer of a much deeper body of truth that we are building together in this community. And if you feel moved to support this work, the donate link is in the description and the pinned comment below. Every act of generosity from this community makes it possible to keep creating messages like this one, crafted with care and intention for the specific person who needs them most. You are seen, chosen one. You are known, you are chosen, and the best of your story is still ahead.